Welcome back. Thank you for staying with Inside Politics. We've reached the last hour of the show. We now want to highlight yet another developing story in the course of this week and the previous weeks as well. Now, President Uhuru Kenyatta castigated the push by governors and senators for more revenue allocation to counties, saying the government has no money. Uhuru's statement comes as Parliament inched closer to a second mediation process within a month that has all pointers of ending in another stalemate after the National Assembly passed a revised Division of Revenue Bill 2019 that has offered counties 316.5 billion shillings, while their counterparts in the Senate passed a separate bill demanding counties to be allocated 335.6 billion shillings in equitable share. And as Patrick Amimo reports, Chief Justice David Maraga should prepare the Apex Court to make a judicious ruling on the stalemate between the two levels of government.
President Uhuru Kenyatta was at Kirwara Boys High School in Gatanga, Murang'a County, to witness the burial of Peter Kenneth's mother, Rahab Wamboi. The stalemate on revenue allocation between the national government and county governments that has seen governors demonstrate to the Supreme Court demanding a share of their cake appears to have irritated the president, and he coughed.
Tunataka kaunti zetu zifanye kazi, ni kweli. Lakini ukienda uitishe pesa ambaye haipo, itatoka wapi? Kuna mtu mmoja peke yake anaunda pesa, na huyo ni mtu anaitwa Delaru na anaishi pale Nairobi. Sisi wengine wote ni tutoe jasho ndio tuone pesa. You cannot make money, you cannot print money. Na mimi nasema kama bunge ama seneti munasema waongezwe pesa, sawa sawa, kateni mishahara yenu, fanya yale mengine, mupatie county pesa.
On Tuesday, the Senate passed the Division of Revenue Bill 2019, which is now before the National Assembly for consideration and concurrence. The Senate wants counties to be allocated 335.6 billion shillings.
This House must ensure that devolution is supported, that devolution is not strangled, that we do not claw back the success that we have made so far in devolution.
We are not here to defend counties on the basis of tokens and goodwill from the leadership in the other house.
Speaker, the notion or the idea that devolution is a favor being done to counties by the national government must be debunked.
A day after the Senate passed its version of the Division of Revenue Bill, the National Assembly on Thursday passed its version of the bill that has offered counties 316.5 billion shillings.
Balance that will be shared between the two levels of government, Honorable Speaker, what is left is 693,854 billion. And out of that, Honorable Speaker, 330,411 billion million will go to county governments, being the 316.5 that is the shareable revenue, and a further 13.911 that goes into grants from the national government.
All of us in this House are cognizant of the importance of making sure that county governments receive their resources.
This is a critical bill that should not be subjected to mediation without an exit route in the event that the two houses don't agree.
Both houses have each closer to a second stalemate as lawmakers from either house dig in.
The Division of Revenue Bill cannot be subjected to the mandarins of mediation.
If there is stalemate, if there is confusion in the management of finances of the country, we are called upon to be sober.
I mean, the National Assembly is just pulling out numbers from the air. 310, 314, 318. Mr. Speaker, we had gotten even to 327, which was the last amount that counties got at 314 billion, plus just 4% co-inflation, which makes it 327 billion. We were being reasonable.
If you take last year, the projection was that the country was to collect about 1.6 trillion. At the end of the day, that was revised downwards to 1.44. That is 1.44 trillion.
If this House was to surrender the position we have taken on the division of revenue this year, then we shall have no moral ground to stand on in the future to challenge and dispute arbitrary allocations of figures and resources to the counties.
On Tuesday, Chief Justice David Maraga gave Parliament until Wednesday next week to unlock the stalemate, failure to which the matter proceeds to hearing. Justice Maraga, the matter is headed to your court, and as you said, you'll hear it if you must. Patrick Amimo, KTN News.
All right, thank you, Patrick Amimo, for that report. Now, the Parliament has been very vocal about it, and another group as well, that's the Council of Governors, have also been very vocal about this issue of revenue allocation. Now, let's just take a look at what the COG chair, Wycliffe Oparanya, had to say about this impending stalemate.
As Council of Governors, we have passed on, because that issue now is between the Senate and the National Assembly. We gave our position during the several meetings we have had before, starting with the first meeting we had in February, the IPEC meeting. As key stakeholders, we gave our input, and as you know, it is the responsibility of the Parliament, the two houses, to make a decision on that particular issue.
All right, now the figures are clear. The Senate on one side actually passed its own version, allocated 335 billion to counties. We have the National Assembly, 316.6 billion as equitable allocation to county governments. Now it is a standoff, and we just want to take a look at perhaps what President Uhuru Kenyatta's input towards this standoff on the division of revenue bill might actually do in terms of the bill. Now, husband, what do you think about it so far? Because we've seen it culminating in a couple of weeks. It's not the first time, yes. What's your input?
Well, I think, first of all, it's very unfortunate because, the county governments depend on this bill to be turned into an act for them to also enact their bills and operationalize, their financial system at the county level. So the more we delay, the more we are approaching an economic crunch at the county levels, which is not a very interesting situation to find yourself in. But by and large, it's just a question of leadership. That I look at this as something that speaks a lot about the dearth of integrity and leadership in most of the leaders that we've elected. Because for me, it's very simple. The law is very clear that this is a bill that the two houses must agree on. And if you look at the extent to which the Senate has ceded ground from 335, they actually went to 327. You would appreciate that they're making an effort to get to a middle ground with the National Assembly. But the hard stance from the National Assembly does not really address anything. In fact, the way Senator Sakaja is saying, they seem to be very arbitrary about things, and they want to take a position that is so militant and against what the Senate has said. I'm sure if the Senate had said a lower figure, the National Assembly behaves like they would have even advocated for a higher figure. But be it as it may, I think the law is very clear that if it is going to be 15%, we need to be addressing ourselves to 335. And if you are negotiating down, it should be on the basis of what Senate is saying. But what people are mixing are issues that if governors are given money and they don't manage them, they don't manage these resources responsibly, the law is very clear. They need to be given. The agencies that are dealing with how they are managing that money should be strengthened. So when you have the president in a public forum issue a very hardline stance, then you start asking yourself, then where are we going to get this leadership? I'm looking at President Uhuru Kenyatta as the person who can mediate between the Senate and the National Assembly. And if he's taking a position that is not based on any kind of mediation, I think it is very unfortunate for some of us who have nothing to do as far as the war between the Senate and the National Assembly is concerned. My own opinion is that going forward, I think the law should just be very clear. And this thing is a culmination of individuals who have abdicated their duties. If Senate is talking about defending devolution, I think it's awesome. It's defense of devolution in the interest of the public. So when money is being stolen, we also need to hear Senate speak to that. They've not been speaking to that. So they also stand on very shaky ground when they say that we have to protect devolution only on resources going down. So if it was a collective engagement that is anchored on leadership, and the president can lead this. They should iron out all this so that we don't find ourselves in all these issues year in, year out.
All right, now, Roslyn, the Constitution is clear. It provides for at least 15% of the latest audited revenue of the national government as passed by the National Assembly, which shall be allocated to counties. Now, when we're observing the debates, especially in the National Assembly, the MPs were dismissing their session by senators and governors, on why the 3.01 trillion budget, and we have only 317.5 billion going to counties. What's your input on this?
I think the approach by both houses is different, because if you look at the National Assembly that is mandated to actually originate the money bills, like the division of revenue, they are saying that there are other requirements that are actually needed to be looked at when dividing this national cake among the two levels of government. And the position they're putting in, as much as we are having a 3 trillion budget, what we have in our basket that we can actually share between the two levels of government is only a projection of 1.8 trillion, which even in the last budget we had projected 1.6 trillion, but we had a shortfall of that. We did not raise that. So if you look at the breakdown that the National Assembly is giving, they're saying if we have 1.8 trillion, and remember our budget, the first charge is a public debt, which currently we are paying 568 billion. So if you look at that and you put also other expenditures, what you're talking about is 1.41 trillion. So if you share this money among the two levels of government, then you find that what we are talking about is 800 and something billion. Already, if you look at our recurrent expenditure for the national government, we are already short of 212 billion. So what we remain is 5 or 6 billion. So that is why they're saying this is what we have now to give counties. But again, there's a hidden finger here, because if you look at Article 203, it talks about at least 15% of the revenue raised. We are talking about the audited revenue of 2013-2014. Okay. We are now in 2019. So are we actually sharing the same revenue as we talk about? Yes, we know there is a shortfall in terms of what Kenya Railway Revenue Authority raises, but are we giving the counties their rightful share? And this is where now the Senate comes in and says, the law says resources follow functions. Now, there are functions which have already been devolved. If we have devolved these functions, they are actually supposed to be properly resourced. As much as we are talking about corruption being devolved in the counties, we cannot peg corruption to allocation. So that is why they're insisting that actually counties should actually get what they demand. If you remember the division of revenue that collapsed, the Senate had actually ceded grounds to 327 billion. The National Assembly stuck at 316 billion, and that is why the division of revenue collapsed. So the Senate said, we are coming in with open hands, but we are not getting the same from our counterparts in the National Assembly. The National Assembly are also saying our colleagues in the Senate are not genuine in terms of the discussion, because if they had actually agreed up to 327 billion, why is it that now they have reverted back to the 335.6 they wanted? And now this is where now we are having the two bills, one being introduced in the Senate with the 335.6, and the one in the National Assembly with the 316.5. And remember the collapsed one, the National Assembly had given counties 310, which was even short of what they got in the last budget, which was 314. Now, we are going to a very interesting week, because here we have the National Assembly saying, now that the Senate have taken us to court, we don't see why we should seek their concurrence. So now that we are done with our bill, let us proceed and take it to the President for assent. If the Supreme Court will give a different opinion, then we'll go back to the table and discuss. So now, where do we leave the counties? According to the PMF Act, yes, they can appropriate up to 50% of what they have. But what does this 50% do? It's for paying salaries. So we have, at the same day, we will not have money for development. So this is where we are now.
A quagmire, I must say. Now, let's get to your inputs, both of you, in terms of the week going forward. I know a lot has been said, but just as she's mentioned, it will be an interesting week just to see how the culmination of this Division of Revenue Bill standoff actually plays out. The president gave his hard stance. We have the Supreme Court in the factor right there, and the president actually might go ahead to assent if the MPs make good their threat. Give us your take, Bichachi.
Number one, we need to always, whenever things get this complicated, my view is always what is the basic right that we bestowed upon ourselves in the Constitution. That basic right is devolution. Now, what we envisaged in devolution was that county government will be given the resources they need to deliver on the promise of devolution. Now, that amount, by a factor of nature and the fact that we increase how many taxes we collect every year and the country grew by 6%, all the factors indicate if the country did grow by 6%, it means that also tax would grow and things like that, which is what we projected in our budget. Therefore, we would also project that the allocation to county governments should increase. It's only logical. Now, the argument as to whether how much money is then available is not a question that county governments can answer. It is not county governments that have incurred large debts. It's not county governments that have participated in the majority of the corruption we're talking about in this country. If you put at how much county governments have received versus how much national government has lost in terms of corruption, you realize that governors are petty thieves compared to Aurora and Kimwarere. You understand? The governors are chicken thieves. These are the guys who stole the cow. Either way, they are thieves. But just the same way as national government allocates itself, despite NYS has a budget today, right? Despite the fact that it has had 2 corruption scandals. So corruption does not dictate how much money you receive. And 2, we must understand and respect the right of the people who voted for their governors. As they voted for their governors, they knew. There's no one who's surprised by how Sonko is behaving, how Joho is behaving. No one is surprised, right? So you voted knowing what you were getting. So you got what you wanted, so we can't complain. The last thing that we must be clear moving into this week, the real question is this: what is the role of Senate? That's what is being fought for. What they're fighting for is the right for these other 24 bills that have been passed without them to be brought to them. So the question that must be negotiated is how does Senate and National Assembly refer to each other in terms of respect? That's the key issue.
Let's get your input.
You know, at the end of the day, our discussions here, we are tiptoeing around the issue. The main issue here, or the elephant in the room, is that Kenya is having a cash flow crisis. And the president himself has admitted in public that there's no money. So whether there's a conflict between the National Assembly and the Senate is just tiptoeing around issues. The elephant in the room is there is no money. And the earlier the senators and the governors appreciate this, the better it is. If there was an actual crisis, that the members of the National Assembly and senators are not able to get into a position, President Kenyatta would have simply, at the flick of his fingers, summoned a parliamentary group meeting and it's sorted out. So all this you are seeing is just gymnastics to cheat morale, that the leadership is in tatters, that there is a conflict. And then when we get to November, when hopefully our cash flow situation normalizes, they will release the funds. And to Chief Justice Maraga, I'm really hoping that in his capacity as the president of the Supreme Court, as well as the other judges, they'll throw back this issue to the National Assembly and the Senate, because this is not their core business. This is not their core business. The Supreme Court shouldn't start entangling themselves into everything, because at some stage, somebody is going to steal a goat and they'll go to the National Assembly, or rather they'll go to the Supreme Court. So Justice Maraga, they had indicated, let the leadership of the 2 houses sit. Even the Deputy President himself, in a rare, very rare of him, he said, let the 2 houses sit and sort out these issues. The rest is just gymnastics.
All right. Interesting. We'll definitely get to see how the week pans out, and we'll be here back to discuss if there are any substantial developments on that standoff in the revenue bill. All right, let's take a short break right now. We are approaching that time where we get to listen to your questions and your views on the various topics we have highlighted. Two of them revolved around graft. We talked about the suspended National Treasury